The sun rose slowly over the African savanna, bleeding gold into the sky like warm honey spilled across the earth. The grass swayed in slow, rhythmic waves, as if the land itself was still waking from a long, quiet sleep. Somewhere far off, an elephant trumpeted, low and distant. Birds called to one another, and beneath a crooked baobab tree, a soft cry broke the stillness. It wasn't the call of an animal. It was a baby, wrapped in a brown shawl, no older than a year. The child sat alone on the dirt. His cheeks were streaked with dust. His voice had no rhythm, no anger, only confusion. As if every sound was a question. Where am I? Why am I here? Why has no one come? The wind stirred. A bird flew overhead, casting a brief shadow across his tiny body. And then, silence. Except for the baby's cry. That's when the lion came. She moved like a whisper through the grass. A lioness, sleek, powerful, and alert. Her body low, her eyes focused. Not on a zebra, not on an antelope, but something small, unmoving. A shape that didn't fit the language of the wild. She paused a few meters away, her amber eyes narrowing. Her muscles tightened. The grass behind her twitched with a breeze. And still, she stared. The baby didn't know what danger meant. He just kept crying. But softer now, almost tired. The lioness took one step closer, then another. Her breath was low, her mouth slightly open, and just when the world seemed to hold its breath, something unexpected happened. A shrill, high-pitched screech cut through the air. Then another, then many. From the trees overhead, branches began to shake. A burst of motion. Tiny figures dropped from the canopy, one, then two, then an entire band. Capuchin monkeys. Small, quick, fearless. They swung down, hollering, barking, throwing twigs and leaves with wild precision. The lioness froze, startled. One of the monkeys, older, larger, with a deep scar cutting across his cheek, leaped forward and landed near the baby. He stood on two legs and raised his arms, shaking them with defiance. The others flanked him, moving like a unit. The lioness growled low, guttural, but she didn't move forward. This wasn't a meal anymore. This was confusion, noise, disruption. But another twig struck her shoulder, and with one last huff of frustration, she turned away. The grass swallowed her whole. The danger was gone. The monkeys fell silent, and the baby too, stunned, to cry, just stared. Slowly, the scarred monkey approached, his face creased with curiosity. He reached out a hand, calloused and worn, and touched the baby's arm, gently, carefully. There was no plan, no instinct that explained this, only something else. He grunted softly, and two smaller monkeys climbed forward. One reached for the shawl, another brushed dirt from the baby's cheek, and then, without hesitation, the scarred male scooped the child up into his arms. The baby didn't resist. He just rested there, as if some part of him recognized this touch, this warmth. Maybe not as familiar, but safe. The monkeys moved quickly, back through the trees, deep into the forest, where the sunlight dimmed and the ground grew softer, older, untouched by man. They brought him to a cave nestled beneath the roots of a massive fig tree. The entrance was narrow, hidden by vines. Inside, it was cool and dim, lit by flickers of green sunlight that filtered through cracks above. This cave became his first real home. At first, the baby cried often, at night, especially, when the wind howled and strange sounds echoed in the darkness. But he was never alone. The younger monkeys would curl around him. The older ones brought fruit, leaves, pieces of bark. They didn't know how to care for a human, but they tried. The scarred male whom the others followed like a chief watched over the baby constantly. If he cried, the monkey was there. If he wandered too far, he'd be gently pulled back. It wasn't the care of a parent, but it was care, and over time, it became something more. Weeks passed. The baby began to crawl. His arms were clumsy, legs uncertain, but he mimicked what he saw. He climbed over stones, grabbed branches, tasted everything, even things he shouldn't have. He learned to sit on the tree's lowest branches, to reach for fruit, to wrap his tiny fingers around vines and leaves. The monkeys groomed him, pulled at his hair, let him sleep against their bodies. He didn't speak, not in human language, but he made sounds, clicks, grunts, soft trills that fit in with theirs. The forest watched and the forest allowed. This child, this odd, fragile thing, was no longer just a visitor. He was becoming one of them by the time he could walk. The jungle no longer seemed like a place that threatened him. It had become a place that accepted him. The monkeys moved like family, and he moved among them like a strange but trusted brother. When they climbed, he followed. When they paused to drink from the river, he did too. When they leaped from tree to tree, he laughed. He laughed. It wasn't the laughter of someone raised among toys and cartoons. It was primal, breathless, honest, the kind that comes from deep in the belly, born of movement and sun and wind and wild freedom. He didn't remember where he came from. He didn't know he was different. All he knew was that he belonged. And so, the forest kept him. Not out of pity, but because sometimes life simply chooses a different path, a quieter miracle, the kind that doesn't need explaining, the kind that lives beneath leaves, between branches, under the eye of the sky. Years passed. But the seasons did not announce themselves with calendars or dates, only changes in scent, in the wind, in the behavior of the monkeys around him. The rain came longer, then the sun stayed hotter. The fruits changed color. The forest whispered things he didn't yet understand, but he grew. His arms became stronger, legs faster, feet hardened from climbing rough bark and landing on cold earth. His skin browned under the open sky. His hair grew long, wild, tangled with leaves and dust and rain. He was no longer a baby. He wasn't even just a boy anymore. He was jungle. When he ran, he made no sound. When he moved, it was like a ghost across branches. His eyes, once soft and uncertain, now scanned the canopy with fierce clarity. He didn't have words, but he had knowing. He could feel tension in the air before a snake dropped from a branch. He could tell when a leopard was near, even before the monkeys screamed. He had a call of his own, now a sharp whistle click that the monkeys responded to. They treated him like an odd member of the troop. Not one of them, but not something else, either. Something in between. Trusted, protected. By the age of 5, he had learned how to leap from a low branch into water without making a splash. He ate figs straight from the tree. He knew which flowers held nectar and which ones bit back. He had no words for these things, just action, repetition, memory etched into muscle. And though he never spoke a human tongue, he was never silent. He sang in whistles, hummed in low growls, laughed when he tumbled from vines and landed in soft moss. He mimicked the sound of birds, made friends with a tree frog. He once watched fireflies for hours, believing they were the stars, come down to dance with him. At night, he curled up in the crook of tree roots, under a canopy of stars and leaves. Sometimes, the monkeys curled beside him. Sometimes, he slept, alone, but never lonely. There was a quiet happiness in those years, the kind that doesn't scream with joy, but hums like wind in tall grass. Simple, complete. But the world doesn't stay simple forever. It started with the sound of metal. He didn't know what it was, but it didn't belong. It rang through the trees like a bell choked by smoke. Not a bird, not a growl. Something sharp, controlled. And then came the scent, strange and stinging, smoke. He crouched low in the trees, watching, his breath shallow. The monkeys scattered above him, screaming in short bursts. Something was coming. Through the trees, 2 shapes appeared. Tall, upright, like him, but not like him. Humans. They wore khaki and boots and carried long black sticks slung over their shoulders. They walked with purpose, with weight. They were talking to each other, but he didn't understand a single word. Not their language, not their rhythm. His heart raced, not with fear, with something deeper, a memory he didn't know he had. They were searching for something, not him. Not yet. He stayed still. He could disappear into trees better than any creature in the jungle, but still, he watched them, followed them for hours, keeping far behind. They looked at tracks, wrote things down on pads, pointed at broken branches. He didn't know why he cared, but something told him this mattered. That night, he returned to the cave, sat beneath the fig tree where the monkeys slept above. He looked at his hands, his long fingers, the dirt under his nails. He pressed a hand to his chest, feeling his heartbeat, and he wondered for the first time who he was. He didn't sleep much that night. Over the next few days, the humans came again, more of them, with louder voices, more gear. They left strange shiny things in the trees, little boxes that blinked and clicked. Cameras. The monkeys avoided them. So did he, but not always. Once, as the sun was setting, he stepped out of the shadows. Just a little, just enough for one of the humans to see him. A woman, brown hair pulled back, a calm face, not afraid, just stunned. She lowered her walkie-talkie, didn't move. He stood at the edge of the grove, one foot in the light, the other behind a trunk, watching, ready to run, but he didn't. Something about her reminded him of stillness, of warmth. She raised one hand, slowly, palm up. No words. He tilted his head, curious. She didn't move, didn't speak, just let him be. Then he stepped back into the shadows, disappearing as easily as a leaf caught in wind. But she had seen him. The next day, she returned, alone this time, no gear, no notebook, just herself and something in her hands, fruit. Bright, soft mangoes. She left them at the base of a tree and sat nearby. He didn't come out, not yet, but he watched. This continued. For days, a dance of patience. She would arrive in the morning, sit under the same tree. Sometimes she sang, softly. Sometimes she just sat. Sometimes she talked, not expecting him to understand, but he listened. Her voice was gentle, like water running over smooth stones. One morning, he approached. Slow, cautious. She didn't look at him directly, just kept her eyes lowered, hands open. He crouched, picked up a mango, smelled it. Then, without a word, he turned and vanished. But she smiled. It was enough. Over time, the space between them shrank. He would sit 10 feet away. Then 5. He began to mimic her sounds. Not full words, just the tone, a low hum, a curious sound of question. She laughed when he did, and he liked that sound. He didn't know the word for trust, but he was starting to feel it. One day, She pointed to herself and said, Maya. Then she pointed to him. He said nothing. She smiled anyway. Elian, she said softly. Can I call you that? He didn't respond, but he didn't run either, so it stuck. Elian. It felt soft, different than the sounds he knew, but not wrong. She came every day now, with fruit, with water, with time. And slowly, the world that had been only trees, vines, and monkeys began to shift. Elian was changing, not because the jungle had failed him, but because something deep inside him, something buried under years of branches and roots, was waking up. A memory. A call, a truth he had never needed before, but could no longer ignore. The first time Elian stepped into a vehicle, he thought the world was ending. The ground moved. The air was thick with rubber and smoke. The trees blurred. He pressed his forehead against the window and watched his forest melt away behind him. It didn't feel like escape. It felt like betrayal. Maya sat beside him, hands folded in her lap, saying nothing. She knew this moment was too big for words. He was leaving behind not just a place, but an identity. He didn't speak, just watched, listened. The growl of the engine, the way the road hummed beneath them, all of it foreign, unnatural. He closed his eyes and imagined the sound of monkeys calling through the trees. That night, he didn't sleep. The lights were too bright, the air too still, the building too quiet. His body, tuned to the chaos of jungle life, couldn't relax in these artificial walls. Maya gave him space, a soft blanket, a fruit bowl, a window. He curled on the floor, as he had done in the cave so many times, and stared at the ceiling like it was a strange sky with no stars. In the days that followed, the humans poked gently at the edges of his world, not with needles but with curiosity. They offered food, toys, puzzles. He ignored them all, but when they brought in a speaker and played the sound of forest rain, he turned his head. He recognized that music, the sound of home. Slowly, carefully, Maya introduced him to language as rules, but as rhythm. She didn't start with grammar. She started with feeling. She showed him pictures of animals, pointing, monkey, tree, water, mango. Then she'd hold the fruit out. Mango. He hesitated, then touched it. M&N, go. She beamed. He didn't know why it mattered, but her smile made it feel like it did. Soon, he was repeating more, not always perfectly, but with effort, with curiosity. Words were strange, heavy things, but also useful. One day, he looked at Maya, touched his chest, and asked Elian. She nodded. Yes, Elian. He looked away, then whispered again, as if testing the sound against his skin. Elian. From then on, he said it often, as if trying to believe it. He watched television once briefly, a documentary on chimps. He sat very still, eyes wide, as images of wild things flickered on the screen. Then he stood, walked to the television, and pressed his hand against the glass. The chimp stared back at him. And for a moment, he looked like a child again. A week later, Maya asked softly, do you remember anything from before? Elian didn't answer, but that night, he brought her something, the brown shawl, torn, frayed, older than memory. He had kept it all those years, hidden it in a tree, and somehow, he had brought it with him. She held it gently, tears in her eyes. Do you know whose it was? He shook his head, then placed a hand on his chest. Then mine. Maya tried to trace his past through DNA, through satellite records, through old reports of missing children. Nothing, no leads, no family. He was a mystery, but he didn't feel like one. He felt like a person. Over the next few years, Elian transformed. He began to speak not fluently but freely. He laughed more. He painted beautiful, strange murals of trees and monkeys, and eyes that watched from behind, leaves. He never liked shoes. He never liked walls, but he learned to live with them. He went to school, briefly, too crowded, too loud, but he stayed long enough to learn letters. How to write his name. He signed it on every fruit he was given, like it was magic. E-L-I-A-N.18. He stood before a small audience at a conservation center. His first speech, he spoke slowly, carefully, but when he told the story, his story, you could feel the air change. They didn't know what I was, he said, his voice soft but steady. But they didn't leave. They stayed. They saved me. People wept. Not because it was sad, because it was true. He became a quiet legend, not a celebrity, not a miracle, a reminder that nature can hold more kindness than we ever expect. He used his growing voice not for fame, but for protection. Of forests, of animals, of orphans both human and not. He founded a sanctuary, a haven for injured primates, abandoned creatures, broken things. He called it the Grove. Deep within its protected forest, under a fig tree, he rebuilt the cave exactly as it was, and some nights he slept there still. He'd lie on the cool earth, eyes closed, listening to the forest breathe. The monkeys chattered in the distance. The wind rustled through the leaves, and for a few hours, he was a child again. Not rescued, not remembered, just alive. On his 25th birthday, Maya brought him a gift. Not wrapped, not expensive, just a photograph. A grainy old image from a satellite captured years ago by accident. In it, a woman carrying a baby across the savannah, no identification, no stomp, no face clear enough to recognize, but in her arms, the shawl. He stared at it for a long time. Is it her? Maya asked quietly. Elian didn't answer. He didn't need to. He placed the photo in the cave that night, next to the shawl, next to the fruit stones and feathers he still collected like treasures. Because family wasn't always something you were born into. Sometimes, it was the ones who found you in your darkest hour and refused to let you go, even when the world told them they should. Years later, when he had white in his hair and lines around his eyes, Elian sat under the tree with a group of children visiting. From the city, he told them the story of the lion, of the monkeys, of the baby in the shawl. One little girl raised her hand. Were you scared? He smiled. No, I was loved. The children sat quietly for a moment, then ran into the trees, chasing butterflies, their laughter echoing through the grove. And Elian leaned back against the trunk of the fig tree. Above him, a capuchin stared down from the branches. It tilted its head, curious, then vanished into the leaves, and in that moment, the world felt whole again.